Good morning and welcome everyone to today's youth discussion brought to you by Servant Leaders. My name is Edith Mugadza and I will be hosting today's discussion. We will be focusing on our struggle heroes with a particular focus on Max Sisulu. To start things off, we'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves alongside the name of the struggle hero that they recall learning about in school. So take it away, everyone.
My name is Deborah Paulsen, and I am doing a theatre and performance diploma at the University of Cape Town. I am majoring in acting, and I just completed the second academic year of this diploma. I would just like to apologize in advance for my physical state. I woke up with a few flu symptoms, so I'm just apologizing in advance. Unfortunately, history was not on the senior curriculum at the school I completed my senior years of high school. So I stopped with history in grade 9. Even though my knowledge on the senior high school course is not that broad, I vaguely remember us learning about the apartheid struggle and how late Nelson Mandela's role contributed immensely towards the current democratic South Africa.
My name is Caitlin Rawson. I am currently finishing off my honours degree in politics, philosophy, and economics, studying through the University of Cape Town. One of the struggle heroes that I remember learning about in school is particularly Steve Biko and his role in the anti-apartheid struggle, specifically with relation to the issues and injustices that were faced by Black students and his role in student organizations.
Sisulu family, my fellow panelists, and everyone else in the audience. My name is Nicholas Kruger. He, they pronouns. I am a 20-year-old BA Theatre and Performance student currently studying my second year at UCT. And the struggle icon that I remember studying in high school was Chris Hani.
My name is Olo Tochani. I'm a second year politics and media student at the University of Cape Town. In high school, we covered a few of the forefront struggle heroes. And one that comes to mind is Steve Biko. I've learned a lot about my identity and what it means to play my role as a youth through Black consciousness.
So I now also have the immense privilege of welcoming our three special guests who have taken the time to be here with us this Sunday. So we have, and to share their insights and their knowledge about the topic on we're discussing today, about South African politics and its liberation. So I now extend a warm welcome to Uncle Max Sisulu, to Auntie Elinor Sisulu, and to Duma Sisulu. If you'd be willing to share a few words of welcome with us.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And we want to please excuse us because we're in an outside area and we may have to move from time to time to get a better, quieter space. We want to pay tribute to Professor Daniel Plakis as a family. He meant a lot to us. Duma was his student, as he will tell you. So he was also worked with Max when he was Max was doing a fellowship at the Wits Business School. So we just thought we'd take this opportunity to pay tribute to him, especially since this interview was one that he did before he passed on. So so we really miss him a lot, and sad that he left us so soon. But we're glad that, and congratulations to Lydia for continuing with his work.
Professor Plakis is one of my lecturers. He was the head of school when I was a student at Wits. I was doing a postgraduate diploma in, it was PNDM, so it's a postgraduate diploma in business management and public development. He was a strict taskmaster, but had a great sense of humor. Helped us, get through varsity without being distracted too much, which is always valuable.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again for taking this time to be with us for this morning. Okay, so on to the topics at hand. So first we have looking at the life of Uncle Max Sisulu before 1994. Caitlin and Loetu will be leading us on this one.
So obviously, Max Sisulu played a huge role in the anti-apartheid struggle, and that's why we are talking about him today, and also lucky to actually have him as part of this discussion today as well. I think his contributions have been invaluable. In terms of, for those who may not know what his role was, he is the son of Walter Sisulu, and growing up during the apartheid years, he obviously was therefore surrounded by the struggle icons, and he then almost was inevitable that he would become involved in the anti-apartheid struggle himself.
So just to go on off of what Caitlin said, I think it was really just enlightening to interact with the interview, and it's really a privilege to be able to be in this space and speak not only about Mr. Max Sisulu, but also with him in his presence. Yeah, so the Sisulu family have some of the most dominant figures in the South African liberation struggle to their name. And like I said, it is a privilege to be here and to speak about Max Sisulu. His first-hand experience in the struggle for a democratic nation has sharpened his determination to ensure that past gains are not swept away by any present greed or sort of lack of respect for the law. And his mindset through it all in his past has saw him through like all his successes and everything that he's achieved during his time. Yeah, he was born in a family. He was the eldest of 5 children, if I'm not mistaken. And coming from a political family, there was a lot of sort of politicized, like, I don't know, like, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, so he was born on the 23rd of August in 1945, and he's the eldest of 5 children. He also made a conscious decision to identify as an African, which is something that stuck out to me in the interview that I watched with him and Professor Plaikis. He identified with the Xhosa culture, and even though he benefited from some privileges during the apartheid period, he was still oppressed. And that sort of catalyzed his drive to fight for freedom and to do what his family had been doing. What also stuck with me in his past, growing up, is the household that he belonged to, it being a place for a lot of political meetings and discussions, it drawing a lot of sort of attention from the police and the lengths that they had to go as a family to protect each other and themselves and to continue to fight for freedom. Yeah, I think that's what stuck out to me the most about his past. And I really liked what he brought up in the interview about wanting to make the house that the Sisulus grew up in into a museum. And I think that's something that as a youth, that's something that we could really cherish and be able to gain a lot from. With aspects like the buried books in the garden. There's a lot of memory, there's a lot of heritage, there's a lot of history that is there, and relevance in the fight to liberation and the continued fight to freedom today.
Just a question as well for Auntie Elinor, if you can tell us anything about that time prior to 1994 and your involvement then.
We met in Holland, where I was studying at the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague. I was doing my master's in development studies, and he was a student, well, he was doing a fellowship at the University of Amsterdam. They had a governing Mbeki fellowship, and every year they took one South African student to do a research program. So he was doing the under a governing Mbeki fellowship. And that's when we met. And after finishing in Holland, he returned to Lusaka and I returned to Zimbabwe. And we got married in 1986, before you were born, I'm sure. And then we He was in exile in Zambia, in Lusaka. And so I then moved to Lusaka and we stayed there until 1991. 1990, we returned in 1990 for a brief time and then permanently in 1991. By then, Duma and Vuyisile were born. And so we returned with 2 children to South Africa after he had been in exile since from 1953 to 1991. When I came, well, I can't say come back because I was coming to South Africa for the first time because I'm from Zimbabwe. And when I came to South Africa, then I worked for Speak magazine, which was a feminist magazine. And then did some work as a human rights, for human rights organizations. And now I work with children's literature. But I'm a historian by background, so I very much appreciate the transfer of knowledge from one generation to another.
I imagine that cultural shift must have been very interesting. I know my parents are also from Zimbabwe. So particularly coming in 1991 as democracy is coming to South Africa, just being a part of that must have been very interesting.
Yeah, I think culturally it wasn't difficult because at the time it was the liberation struggle. And so you had a common liberation struggle culture. And I think also there's a lot of cultural affinity between Zimbabweans and South Africans because of our historical roots. So culturally, it wasn't difficult. And I think, in fact, for me, it was easier to come to South Africa than for my husband because he was, I didn't have any expectations. I was not coming back to anything. So it was something new. Whereas for someone who's been in exile, it's a very difficult thing because you've missed out on all those years and you have certain expectations which can't be met because the past is the past and you can't capture it again.
Good morning, all. My name is Max Sisulu. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today and listening to you too. I grew up in Johannesburg, and I was the eldest in a family of 5 children. And we also had permanent visitors who were not invited to the house, but the police who kept a beady eye on both my mother and my father. And more often than not, we got, some of us got arrested in the struggle against apartheid. But we remember fondly our, in growing years, we had a lot of sympathy from our neighbors and our people of South Africa. Dad and Mom were active politicians, and for their activities, they were more often than not jailed, sent to prison. I also was detained when I was very young, and therefore prison for me was not something new, but it's something that nobody actually liked, especially if you are imprisoned by people who themselves had no right to anything in South Africa, except their love for tampering with black lives, and also their love for themselves. But going back to South Africa, I was born in Johannesburg.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we can get the questions now.
Okay, thank you so much, Auntie Elinor and Uncle Max, for that. Next, we have Kawe and Deborah, who will be talking to us about Uncle Max's career path since 1994.
My name is Kawe Mkebe. I am currently doing my 2nd year, pursuing a Bachelor of Laws or LLB, and I'm grateful to be here and welcome to everyone who's here. So from the year 1994 Mr. Max Sisulu joined the first democratic parliament as a member of parliament himself. There, he served as the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on the Reconstruction and Development Program, or RDP, as they say. He then, in 1994, was appointed as Chief Whip of the African National Congress, and simultaneously, he was organizing training programs for members of parliament in economics and finance. In 1988, he left the parliament to become Deputy Chief Executive Officer, of Denel Aerospace, a state-owned military technology conglomerate.
I will just continue this conversation. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information on the period between 2006 up until 2009. So I will just jump forward to 2018 when Mr. Max became an independent non-executive director board of Harmony Gold Mining Company Limited. And I just want to reiterate yet again how honored I am and my fellow panelists that we have the honor of having the Sisulu family join us today. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. I wasn't aware Deborah could not find that information. I apologize for that. But so between 2001 and 2003, he takes the role of the chairman at the South African Aerospace, Maritime and Defense Industries Association. And then following that, he joins Cecil as one of its group general managers until the year 2006. Then post that, he becomes the first Black male Speaker of the National Assembly in 2009, up until 2014, when that National Assembly dissolved for the next term.
Then perhaps we can add the next, that after being chair of the National Assembly, when he then went into retirement and now works with his sons on some business interests and some ANC veteran work. Anything else?
Well, for starters, let me say thank you very much. Nice seeing you and talking to you. I grew up under a terrible system in South Africa called apartheid. Yeah. And it had nothing to offer the oppressed people except more oppression. And one of the things that we
we're talking about the post 1994.
Oh,
when after retirement, you tell them how you feel about retirement.
Oh, okay. To jump forward to the present, I am an ANC activist. I was an activist since I was very young. My father was an active politician, and so was my mother. And one of the things that made us continue the struggle was because of the oppression at home in South Africa. But also my father and my mother were from time to time jailed. And I was also jailed when I was about 17, 18 years old. And so we grew up fighting for our freedom, the freedom of our people. But also, most important, we were very concerned about not just the past, but the future of our country. And I was involved in the Swazila, which was a pioneer group, pioneer movement. And we were taught at an early age that fighting for freedom is something that you just don't go and collect from the street, but it's something that you have to learn to do all the time. It is fighting for the future, and the future belongs to the young people. And therefore it was imperative that all of us joined our forces in fighting for a better future for all. And I was very happy when I finally graduated from being a young person to an adult and working very closely, not only with my mom and my dad, but also with the people of the country and the population of the world as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something about a conversation that we had with Professor Daniel Plakis, because under the Wits Fellowship, Max wanted to do a thesis on parliamentary budgeting. And Daniel said, but you know what? We're more interested in your life, and we're more interested in things that young South African people don't know. And looking at Max's life and the lives of his contemporaries, they were in the underground, and then many of them studied in the Soviet Union of the time, and they went to do military training. And those areas, as the information on that is not easily available. And they themselves don't talk about that because they were trained not to talk about it. And I think it became ingrained. So I think that that's one area of history that I think has been unfortunate that we haven't really, there are various history projects at different universities, and there's South Africa History Online, which I'm sure some of you consulted for the information that you need today, which is the best source of South African struggle history. But I think it's unfortunate. We've been working on gathering Max's papers so that we have an archive that we'll share, which will probably be lodged with Wits University. But I think I don't know, I feel unsatisfied with the way we pass information from one generation to the other, that we're not intentional enough, we're not systematic enough, and also in a way that doesn't, contemporary, that is not colored by contemporary politics, but is the lives of those people, whatever we think politically now, but the lives of those people that are very valuable. And so yeah, that's a major work that we have to do, so that young people like yourselves, when you want to find out information on anyone, don't have all these gaps and have to look in different places. So I would ask you to support South Africa History Online. Unfortunately, they're always struggling for support, but the more they are visited, the more people use them as a resource, the better their position is to get the resources to sustain them. And yeah, so we have a lot to do. I mean, even our own children, there's areas of Max's life that he hasn't told us, and some of the things, especially the Soviet Union and the military training period. And that's something that we're hoping to write down as a family, first of all, for our own children and grandchildren, but then for the youth like yourselves.
Thank you, Mom. Leading into that, stories that were never told. Interestingly enough, we're in Swaziland, and Mom and Dad have been meeting the people that they were in Holland with, staying with in Holland when they got married. It's been interesting hearing the story of how they met each other from a different perspective, not from them. So I've really enjoyed that trip so far. Hearing the parents' story from the others who were there is very enlightening. So that's been fun. And then on further stories of my father in his travels, the only stories we would get told were, the funny anecdotes. It's whatever my mom was saying, it's a training that they've gone through. They don't share much else besides the good stories. I guess it's a way to protect us and not tell us the hardships that they've gone through. It's unfortunate because you don't get the full color of what it was like, and the full color of what it was like, and the full color of what it means that now we have succeeded and got this freedom. And because of that, I find a lot of young people don't really understand what it means. They would come up with things like to say Mandela was a sellout, not understanding context or not understanding history. And that's one of the reasons I'll share the view of my mother, that the history has not been passed out generation to generation. The story my auntie tells me, she says, it's almost like the parents expect children to learn history via osmosis. They don't always share everything that happened at the time. So with us and our family, we've started collecting all my father's papers. We've got a dedicated my younger brother's old bedroom since he's moved out. It's now become a library, and we've collected all these papers. We've archived all of them. We have about half a room full of documents that's going to be handed over to WITS, and WITS will then make part of their archive. And then jumping forward to post retirement for my father, he started working with myself and my other brother Shaka. We were initially in fossil fuel. That was our point of interest. My dad told us that, look, this is a sunset industry, and if you want something long that goes into the future and leave something for your children, you really need to be the opposite of that, and not in fossil fuel, but move towards green. And since then, we've been looking at green initiatives and how to greenify South African economy, and what are the ways that South Africa can get itself off the fossil fuel, and what are the ways South Africa can build something for the future. And in light of where Eskom is right now, it's really an important time to focus on this. Thank you.
Thank you for those insights, but also just those recollections as well, both looking at your father's legacy, but then also from the perspective of Auntie Elinor and Uncle Max, just looking at it from their perspective and being there in those times. Then we'll be moving on to the question about the significance of these two eras in Uncle Max's life before and after apartheid, and Nicholas will be leading us on this conversation.
Thank you, Edith. I just want to say thank you again to Uncle Max and Auntie Elinor and Duma for giving us their time today and joining the panel discussion along with us. I will be going off a lot of what's been said already and just giving a brief understanding about the significance of Uncle Max's life pre-1994 and post-1994. So as Uncle Max was saying earlier, that he grew up around politicians. He grew up around a lot of the liberation leaders we learn about, and some of them that we don't learn about, which is another reason, which is why I really appreciate Auntie Elinor's point about how knowledge is passed between generations, because Uncle Max was not one of the people that we learned about in school, and that is a disservice to what he did to ensure liberation for South Africa. So in '63, Uncle Max and his mum were both arrested as part of a terror campaign by the apartheid regime targeting his father, where afterwards he was released and went into exile, joining Umkhonto we Sizwe against the apartheid regime. Between '63 and '94, he would go on training and educating himself, gaining, as Auntie Elinor said, a one-year scholarship at the Governor Mbeki Scholarship at the University of Amsterdam in Holland, where he met Auntie Elinor. And the one thing I would like to emphasize is that Uncle Max has been in the fight for a truly long time. He fought the long fight from beginning to end and continued to fight in the post-apartheid environment at the end of formal apartheid, which I'll now talk about. In '94, Uncle Max became a member of parliament, and later on in 2009, as Awe mentioned, in the 2009 and 2014 term, he served as the Speaker of Parliament. And I would just like to highlight two important quotes from his interview, where Uncle Max was talking about how the parliament must be a parliament of the people, where he as Speaker cannot privilege other parties over the other ones, allowing all voices from all the different representations in Parliament to have their say. And the other quote I'd like to highlight is where Uncle Max said, "The institution of Parliament must outlive us." And it's something that I agree with very passionately, is that the democratic institutions that we all talk about and we believe in have to exist forever. They have to have a longevity. We have to believe in them for them to work. And for them to work, we need to, and for us to believe in them, they need to work. That democracy is only as strong as the people participating in it. So yes, and I think that's the end thing that I would like to say, is that as Uncle Max said in his interview, is that one must deliver the promises that they keep, working with intention with what you do. What you say has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nicholas. Also, just taking this question to Duma, just looking at the significance of your father's life and the legacy that has had, are there any lessons that jump out to you, any lessons that you would want for the youth to hold on to?
Yeah, quite a few, but one would be a story from, I must have been in grade 10. I came back to my dad after exams, well, pre-exams. It was a couple of tests, and I was trying to boast to him because I wanted to get something out of him that I got a good mark. I came and I showed him I got about 90% for biology. I was hoping he would give me extra pocket money. His response was, excellence is the norm and not the exception. So if I can do it again, if I've done it now, I need to do it again and again and again. Only then can you expect something out of it. So that's generally been his view on life, is that it's not just enough to do it once. You got to do it consistently. It has to be the norm. It has to be how you behave. It has to be who you are. You always have to persevere, and you have to do things repeatedly. You have to do things properly. You have to do things the right way. That was one of the key lessons I've learned from him, and he's done that throughout everything he does, from politics to business. It's always about the integrity of what you're doing. It's always about the consistency of what you're doing. It's also always about doing it right.
Thank you. I think that's a particularly powerful sentiment when we look at the work ethic and the capabilities of the youth to just hold on to that idea of excellence being the norm and not an exception. I was literally just writing it down now in my journal because I was like, wow, that's something I feel like I need to take into both my exams, but also just how I approach life as a whole, to continue to strive for excellence and to continue to work hard and to put everything that you are into all that you do. So now moving on to the more open parts of the discussion, just also a reminder to everyone who is watching the panel discussion with us, please feel free to leave questions down in the comments, and questions or comments or words of affirmation down in the comments, and then we will read them and try and address them as best as we can. So moving on to the more open discussion topics. So we're looking at the idea of how the lives of those who were during, before, or after apartheid, and how those were influenced by each other. So it's looking at how relationships that were formed amidst the struggle have thus long lasted and lived into the present democratic day, and how comrades working in arms then have now been bolstered into political roles now. If anyone would like to start us off.
Well, I think on that discussion question, you can kind of also relate that back to what Auntie Elinor was saying about how we don't really learn enough about our history. And oftentimes when you think about the way you learn about struggle heroes in history class, you learn about them in isolation. You don't learn about the full picture necessarily. And you don't get that understanding of how these connections were formed between people and how everything was so interrelated in that sense. And you learn about maybe one or two or three significant people, but you don't learn about the connections that they had with everyone else and how important that kind of camaraderie was to the movement. And I think, again, that's a huge disservice to the youth of today, who are almost basically just being given the very Cliff Notes version of okay, you've learned about this one struggle hero and that's kind of enough for you to get the idea, but it really isn't. And I think that's why kind of things like these panels and like the servant leader websites are so important. And even like Auntie Elinor was mentioning, South African history websites are so important because it is how we can actually contribute to our own history and gain that deeper understanding of all these like very important factors beyond just what you learn in your history class in school.
Yes, maybe I can add to that. You know, we've just gone through these local government elections, which have been quite a painful experience for many people, feeling that we don't really have a choice. We've got the ANC, which is not what the ANC as we would like it to be, in many ways struggling with dealing with internal corruption and ineptness. Then we've got other parties which actually don't offer an alternative. And so for many ANC people, they just didn't go and vote. So when you find yourself in that kind of situation, you need to look into the past. And I mean, I think for the ANC especially, it needs to look at the kind of leadership that it has and say, what do we need to do to bring back that kind of leadership? I had a discussion with Rita Mfenyana, who is the wife of Cindy Mfenyana, another amazing ANC veteran whose history is not known much. And I was saying, you know, why is there this change in the quality of leadership from the ANC pre-1994 to the ANC now? And she said an interesting thing, which I think has a lot of truth, is that the ANC, when it was banned, there was a big cost to belonging to the ANC. So you know, imprisoned or banned or exiled, or you paid a price, and you had to have a strong level of commitment to belong to the organization. It wasn't something easy to be part of the ANC. And then that changed. After the ANC was banned, and in 1994, it's changed. So it was different. Then anyone can become an ANC, a member of the ANC. So in a sense, before there was like a pre-selection course. So, you know, when you look at the notion of being a servant leader, before 1994, the people that emerged as leadership had to make enormous sacrifices, financial, personal sacrifices. After 1994, there's no sacrifice involved. And I think that is a problem which liberation movements face when they become ruling political parties. And they actually have to reflect and interrogate. There has to be a different dynamic for leaders. And I think that for the challenge to me that I see for the ANC today, and in fact for any political party, is how do you get the best and the brightest and the most committed of the young people to become part of your political movement. It's sometimes almost as if there's a disjuncture between the politics of the youth leagues or the youth sections of the different political parties and the youth out there who are doing amazing things, like young people who are involved in the struggle for climate change, who are fighting against gender-based violence, and different things in the arena of social justice. How do we get those young people to become at the forefront of party politics? And to me, it seems it's not happening. And I do ask some of the young people who are distinguishing themselves in their fields, you know, why aren't you are you part of a political movement? And just generally, there seems to be almost such a disillusionment with politics, at least party politics. So I think that's a real challenge. And I don't know what you as young people feel, but I mean, really, when you look at who will be the future political leaders in the country, it's a question that we must grapple with.
No, you're incredibly right, Auntie Elinor. Deborah, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much for your insights, Auntie Elinor. I would just like to go back on you mentioning the knowledge that gets passed on from generation to generation. And I think personally for me, also being one of the young citizens of South Africa that always thought that I don't want to involve myself. I think it also stems from a place of the importance of knowledge being passed on, because if we look at our school curriculums, how sad it is that we don't get informed and we don't get educated on the historical background of these historical figures that played such an important role in the society that we were born into. If we look at us as a generation here, we were born into a post-apartheid South Africa, and it's because of the roles of these historical figures that I truly believe we should learn about. So just to start an answer, if I might put it that way, I think what needs to happen is we need to take a look at our education system, because there is a major gap in that. And I think it's sad, because I was one of those university students that you get to university and you know nothing, and then fortunately we get this opportunity where we have panel discussions and we get to learn more, and we get to also pass on our perspective. And just to take it back to the leaders of this country, I think they are one of the difficulties that we face. I think it's very sad, but the leadership of a country is a difficulty that the country is facing, because I think from my perspective, I think they lack focus on the true intention. I'm not trying to disregard life before 1994 by using the words simple and plain, because I think the intention of the leadership today, they're missing that focus, which should at the end of the day just be equality, So yeah, I think taking it back to your question, I think we should definitely start with the education system, because that's where we learn, and that's where we're supposed to learn. But then we have these gaps, so that's just a thought from my side. And I think for me personally, it would be interesting to know what my fellow panelists have to say about that, unless Auntie Elinor, you also want to add. But yeah, I'm done for now.
Thank you for that, Deborah. I just know it's a very interesting point that you bring up on the idea of history, elaborating on what Auntie Elinor was speaking on. I know that when you look at our constitution, right, in the preamble, it comes and it spends this time where it says, we need to make decisions today that look at what our history was and understand where we're coming from in our path of reconstruction. And I think it's really difficult to keep that historical perspective in mind when we are slowly but surely losing fragments of our history. When you have a youth that knows of only 3 to 4 characters within the struggle, but not much else, you can slowly start to see that slow fragmentation of our history and loss of our history. And so then when you're trying to make decisions that are supposed to keep that history in perspective and consider what needs to be righted, it's kind of difficult to know what those wrongs are or their entirety when we lack a full understanding of its context. So a question that was going to be brought up later, but I think would be more pertinent now, is just to look at the current leaders and leadership styles that we have and what are the current challenges that we are facing as a country. Kawe, would you be willing to answer that?
Hello, everyone again. I think a lot has been said that actually relates to this question about having to have paid the price, or that would sort of entrench that commitment to what has to be done. But as you're asking that question now, what I'm thinking back to is, I think, a seminar or interview with Advocate Ncukai Tobi, where he says that when our constitutionalism focuses on reducing the power of government, what you then have is a matter of power struggles as opposed to the delivery of needs or of services to the people. So I think it's not even about the leadership styles themselves, something within the constitution, which myself, I could never point out correctly and say, this is the problem. But in that, we find that it's about what office is supposed to do that, or what this cabinet is supposed, this minister or whatnot is supposed to do. And then in that focus, what ends up being lost is what needs to be done for the people. I'm not sure if I've answered the question correctly.
No, I hear what you mean. Thank you for that, though. Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of a fragmenting of roles, as if each job is not interconnected, and we need to address a lot of problems from a more holistic perspective as opposed to fragmenting up. Oluwetu, would you like to add?
Yes, I think I really liked what Deborah said just now about sort of leadership lacking a sort of intentionality, like that's a word, but like I think a little bit more like for our leaders to be a lot more intentional. I think what stuck with me and what I wanted to bring up now is a part in the interview with Uncle Max and Professor Blakey's is just how he emphasized to not surrender the fight for freedom. I think that came after the part where he was basically discussing his time in Umkhonto weSizwe and what that stood for during that time. And how there was something that he said that stuck with me about how not surrendering the fight for freedom, and how our time right now, that fight for freedom is the fight for socioeconomic justice and equality. That's our fight for freedom. And somehow I link it to what's lacking in our leadership today is there's a sort of surrendering in that fight. We're not fighting hard enough to achieve economic justice, to achieve equality, to carry on the legacy of our struggle heroes. We're not hungry enough, and I think that sort of reflects in our leadership style. Uncle Max says that it's a struggle for socioeconomic justice, socioeconomic change, and change for the vast majority of the people. Again, there can't be a surrender of that struggle for a better life. The struggle for a better life will continue until we all reach the better life. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
Can I come in on the issue of institutions and the role of institutions? Because I think it is relevant when you talk about leadership, that a servant leadership is one that respects institutions and does not see itself as higher than institutions. And I think we do have a problem as a society generally. We sometimes want leaders to be bigger than institutions. For example, people will demonstrate and say, the president must get involved in this. Why is the president quiet? When actually it's not the role of the president to be part of that particular issue, it's the institution that has to address it. And I think one of the good examples, and I'll praise my husband here for his leadership, was when he was first chief whip of the ruling party, and then later when he was Speaker of Parliament, that he was not just there as an ANC person, he transcended the political differences and served Parliament. So as Speaker, yes, he was an ANC person, but also as Speaker of Parliament, he had to be a speaker for all the parliamentarians. And that was reflected in the way they appreciated him. And I've been trying to get the footage out of Parliament, and hopefully I'll still one day be able to get it. When he left after he was Chief Whip of Parliament, and they had a session saying goodbye to him. And each and every political party paid tribute to him. And how he managed to work with all of them. And then when he was Speaker again, people acknowledged that he was a speaker for everybody. So I think that there's a very important issue about leadership being able to transcend political differences. And that's how leaders get respected across the board. And of course, Mandela is the best example of a leader who transcended political differences, and everybody saw him as our leader, regardless of whatever their political or religious persuasion is. So I think it's really important in politics for young people to be conscious of institutions, how institutions work, what institutions are supposed to do, and what they are not supposed to do, and where political interference, you want a country that's where institutions work properly and not having to rely on the whims of a politician to make decisions about issues. You need an IEC that functions properly. You need a judiciary. You need your institutions to be independent. And that leadership is not just in the party political terrain, but strong leadership in each and every one of those institutions is important. And I think the early ANC leaders and even leaders of other political parties did give an example of that, but seems we've lost it somewhere along the way. And I think for young people, it's important to understand institutions, understand how they, because sometimes you're demanding something about a politician, which they can't actually deliver because it's an institution that's supposed to deliver that. And a badly functioning institution, no matter how good the leader is on top, is going to struggle to deliver what it needs to deliver to the people.
As we just reach the 5 minutes to go marker, just one last question directed at Uncle Max, particularly in light of our last election and the rise of independent candidates and questions about whether or not they have a room in South African politics as we proceed forward. Just wanted to hear your take on
Life is about change, constant change for the better, not for the worse. And in politics, there are also changes. We fight for particular issues at a particular time. When the time has passed, we go on to something new. At the end of the day, what we want to do is to make it a better life for all now and in the future. And to do that, we need to understand what the issues are. We need to understand the problems of the people. It's not good enough just to be above the people and give instructions. What's important is also to be part of that process for change, making sure that the change that happens is a change that's good for all people. There's no point in a change that makes it worse for the people than before. So the constant life of the people is that we want a better life for ourselves, for our children, for future generations. We fight also for the future, even before we have left the past. So the understanding, at least in the movement, is that we are all learners. At the same time, we all become teachers, teachers of the future, teachers of the young ones, so that what they inherit is the best in society. They shouldn't inherit the worst, but certainly the best. And how do you do that? By constant discussions with the young people, making sure that they understand your role and their role. And also making it important that that role must be the one that they decide on. You can't just decide for the people, this is good for you, not good for anybody else. Change is about making things better for all, not for some. Now, in short, what is required here is a constant learning process, but also a constant process of teaching the younger ones to be better in life. You want life to be better for them than it might have been for you yourself. So life is about constant change for the better. And for that you would need a lot of things. One is learn from the past, good or bad. The bad you don't want to repeat, but you want to avoid. And the good is what you need to do so that you know your role in society, in your home. So it's not just about society, it's also simple things like the good things you do at home. You don't expect your mom to be doing everything for you as a child, but you expect your mom to be part of that process of helping you and you helping her and everybody else. So life is about that change and constant change. What does it mean now for all of us? It means that we need to look at how far we have gone and how far we need to go further in order to make it a better life for all. Our aim and objective is a better life for all. The question is, how do you go about it?
I'd like to add to that to say, I think for young people now, it's really important to read extensively. The issue of the education system was raised, and I know some of you were part of the demand for a decolonized education. And I always found it strange that students were demanding decolonized education from the government, because the government is not capable of giving a decolonized education. It actually must come from the institutions themselves. And it comes from a groundswell of reading to say, what is it our education system is not giving us? And then we have to find that and read up on it and know. And I think what you're doing today, I would actually say, is part of the decolonizing process, because it's about seeking information about ourselves and those in our midst. I also think the other thing is that the big challenge that youth have today is about the survival of humanity. People talk about survival of the planet, but actually it's not the planet, it's our species. And that's something which we didn't have to face when we were young people. And so I think the rise of independent candidates in local government elections is really important. And hopefully they can bring more of an environmental focus, a focus on the type of energy we use, on how we use water, how we conserve our resources, our precious resources. So hopefully independent candidates can do that. Unfortunately, sometimes that's not always the case. It can result in just more confusion and fragmentation. But those are trends that we have to watch and see where we go. And I think for young people, the better armed you are with knowledge, the more capable you will be of meeting those challenges.
Thank you for that, Uncle Max and Auntie Elinor. And no, you're 100% right. It's a very nuanced issue, and obviously we need to work together in reflecting on whether the issue stems from our institutions or if it's a leadership question. And in that, it's bringing in this idea of constant change and being open to learning and discussing and implementing new ideas and new ways forward. So we thank you for that and for your input. As we reach the end of this discussion, just calling on some final thoughts from each of our panelists, what they have taken away from this discussion, what has been learned and engaged with, starting with Duma, perhaps.
Thank you very much. I think the work you guys are doing is incredibly important. Don't take it lightly. This kind of engagement should be happening continuously. This is part of transition of knowledge, or passing down of knowledge. It's also part of a key part of your education, being able to understand roles and as my dad was saying, where you come from, which is very important to know where you're going. And also this kind of thing helps you distinguish what kind of people we need to produce in the future to take our country forward. And then from what I take from the discussion, I take the importance of reading, the importance of knowledge, the importance of passing that on. It's of the utmost importance, and I don't think most people in this country understand that, and it helps you understand or think in the really long term. If you don't know what happened 100 years before you, it's going to limit your view of what should happen in 100 years' time. So I think this is very important. Thank you.
I think I would my takeaway from today was just to echo what everyone has been saying is a focus a lot on political education, just so you have an understanding, or at least can make your own conclusions as to what's happening in your country, because at the end of the day, we're all here living in South Africa, and we all have to work together to make it a better South Africa, or the South Africa that we all envision for ourselves. And then also to reiterate onto Elinor's point about passing down knowledge, it is incredibly important to manufacture ways where we can accurately pass down as much knowledge to the next generation possible to equip them. And I think that it's our job as the current generation to always prepare for the next one. Yes, and just once again, I'd like to thank the Sisulu family for giving us the time. It was an absolute pleasure to be here with you.
Deborah, would you like to add next?
Yes, thank you so much, Edith. I am so thankful for today. Auntie Lydia said in the chat, such valuable lessons, and I completely agree. I think what I take from today, and I think it's something we all used to take so lightly, is the importance of reading, and in like making sure that you get informed and you getting educated, and just the process of beginning with yourself and finding out what you can do to also get that knowledge. I think that's very important. And then making sure, like my fellow panelist Nicholas just said, to pass that knowledge on. So yeah, and also how Uncle Max mentioned the consistent process of change. I think that's also something that I take from today. And yeah, I'm just so grateful and honored to have had the Sisulu family part of today. Thank you, like Nicholas just mentioned, for your time and sharing your insights and your views with us. It's something that I believe we will all keep dear to our hearts, and that we will make sure to pass on what we learned here today with the fellow youth of South Africa. Thank you.
Caitlin, if you
May I go next?
Oh, sure, go.
Oh, sorry. I think today has been a wonderful learning curve, and if anything, I think there were two concepts of values that were mentioned: commitment and intention. And I think it's important for us as young leaders to have those values, to know that how committed we are to whatever task that we sign into, and the importance of intention. Because if you are not aware of what you're about to do, then you are as good as someone who's just aiming at nothing and hoping the arrow sticks somewhere. But if you have intention, you know that you're looking for, what do they call it, the bullseye, and that's where we should be putting our efforts or all our energy into. And that's how I think we can achieve anything, really. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind going next, please.
Yeah. Firstly, I would just like to say thank you so much to Uncle Max, Auntie Elinor, and to Duma for being part of this discussion today. I think all of your insights have been so valuable, and I really think that I've learned a lot and appreciated all the knowledge that you guys have provided us with in this discussion. And I think particularly one of the points that was mentioned about the idea of politics being about constant change and trying to change the future for the better. And I think that's a lesson that we can all take with us. So yeah, once again, thank you to the Sisulu family for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much for that, Caitlin. And Olwetu?
Yes, such valuable lessons. It's honestly been such a privilege to be able to sit through this and to interact with the Sisulu family, so I'm very grateful. Something that I took away, which a lot of the panelists have already mentioned, is the importance of knowledge, is learning from our past and using that in going forward. Also the value and the notion of change being for the betterment of all, not just some. And how what Uncle Max said, that change is constant, and that when we meet one goal, we're going to have to work towards the next goal. And that decision to have these sort of discussions, be servant leaders, be active citizens, be conscious in society and work towards this goal is an active, it's a conscious decision like to do that. And it took me back to the interview where Uncle Max explains his decision to sort of take the political route and to fight for freedom and to join Nkondwe Sizwe and just take the actions that he did, and how that was a political and conscious decision. It's something that us as the youth that we have to do. We have to make the decision to work towards learning and unlearning and to constantly achieving the next goal for the betterment of everybody.
Thank you for that, Mwetu. Just a final few words from myself. So starting off, a huge thank you to the Sisulu family for being with us this morning. Your insights and your knowledge and your memory on this is invaluable to us as the youth, particularly as we move further and further away from our history from a time perspective. It's so valuable to have that connection and to have people who can remind you of where we're coming from and remind you of all that was won in the fight for liberation. I'd like to thank servant leaders for not only the opportunity to host, but also just for the opportunity to partake in a discussion like this, particularly when forums like this are slowly becoming less and less available as we move towards a more technological age, which is, yes, infiltrated with different forms of communication and yet somehow very isolating at times. So I just thank you for spaces like this where you can come and you can discuss and you can learn and you can grow and you can hear from the voices of our liberation and of politics as a whole, and to just better understand this notion of servant leadership from our servant leaders. If you'd like to learn more about servant leadership and the youth panel discussions and just being an active citizenship, please go to the websites and try and learn more. We can also find more information on the Instagram page, Servant Leader 7. So from my side, thank you. I've learned a great deal on the ideas of changing and growing as far as our democracy, but also in learning and enriching yourself as an individual. And I'd like to just thank once again the Sisulu family and www.servantleaders.co.za for this opportunity. Thank you everyone for being here.
I can frankly say that we also, in talking to you, listening to you, we've also learned something. Life is about learning all the time and every time. And for me and my wife, we are happy to have been here with you today, and we wish you all the very best. Thanks a lot.
And thanks very much to Lydia for her determination and for her organizational skills. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much, Max, Elinor, Duma, and the panel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.